But if you don't get enough organ meats in your diet, this is the conversation you need to listen to.
My youngest was about a year old. She got addicted to gluten-free toast. And I just was watching her eat it, just going like, this is not healthy. Like, I wish there was something I could sprinkle on this toast to make it healthier. I'm not trying to change what you're eating at this point. I'm just trying to make what you're eating more nutritious.
I woke up one morning and I was like, now I remember what it feels like. I feel like a normal 52-year-old today. My knee hurts, my hip hurts. A few days, a week back on really strict carnivore. My knee stops hurting, my hip stops hurting.
There's one person in this relationship with us that will never lie, and that's your body. Your job is to listen to your body, and your body's response is everything.
This video is brought to you by Purely Tallow Skincare. And with skincare, the rule is simple. If you wouldn't eat it, you shouldn't put it on your skin. That's why we make all of our products with 100% grass-fed beef tallow. We also use emu oil and even wild camel hump fat in some of our lotions. Check out our website at purelytallow.com. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Carnivore Revolution. I'm Serena, and my guest today is James Berry. Now, he's the inventor of Pluck. Those of you that don't know, we're going to talk about what Pluck is, but if you don't get enough organ meats in your diet, this is the conversation you need to listen to, and this is the product that you need to buy. Hey, James, how are you?
I'm doing great, Serena. How are you?
Awesome. I'm really good. Now, we were at an event together in May. I'm assuming that you'll be there again in May of 2026.
Yeah, so far planning on it. Yep.
Yeah, a super awesome event called Meat Stock. More information on that later, too. But I want to talk to you about your product and how you came into this space. So let's start there. Like, how did you come into this, like, meat and organ kind of space?
Yeah, I know it's weird being the first to kind of come up with this, but it's so funny too, because organ meats are a food. Mm-hmm. And yet kind of historically, you're either eating them as a food, which sadly in the US that's declined severely, or you're taking them in capsule form. And so when I started Pluck, that was the main way people were getting it, was in capsule form. And I was like, well, wait, it's a food. Like, what are we doing swallowing it in capsule form? Like, let's get it back to being a food. So it was definitely my sensibilities as a professional chef, like, and just being someone who's really all about flavor. That's what got me into it. But what really sunk deep for me and made it really imperative was being a father. Had my two daughters. It was all about how do I help them thrive, and doing the research and finding what are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. Hands down, it's organ meats. And so it was like, how do I get this into their diet and mine without a fight? Because I'm a picky eater to a degree. I grew up a very picky eater. I know kids can be picky. And it was really about like, look, we already work hard enough as parents. Like, how do we get these nutrient-dense foods into them? And that's when Pluck came about.
Yeah, and it's so funny to have this conversation now because my kids grew up not on the standard American diet. We've always been pretty healthy. Like, when they were starting at like even 18 months old, if they were hungry and we were in the car at a stoplight, I would open a can of green beans and I would dump the water and I would hand them the can of green beans. Like, so we've always been healthy eaters, but I fought with them about broccoli and Brussels sprouts. I wish I'd have been fighting for organ meats that whole time. Knowing what I know now, I kind of wish I could redo that and introduce the organ meats, as one of the first things instead of something like broccoli.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's interesting. I was just at a conference and I did a whole presentation about the history of organ meats and gave people tips on how to get them into their diets. It was a nice, like, nearly hour-long presentation. And at the end, there was some Q&A, and a mother got up and she said, I'm worried that I gave my kids too much when they were younger, because I was putting liver in the milk. I was doing all these things that I thought were right. And it's kind of reminding me of what you're saying now, which is I feel like as parents, we have the best intentions. We're doing the best we can, but we're dealing with whatever knowledge we have in the moment. And one of the questions I asked her, and in a sense, this would be the same for you, is like, well, how are your kids now? And she said, well, no, they're really good. They have some gut stuff that we have to still heal, but they're really good. And I said, well, let's take that in for a second. Like, get out of the story of we shoulda, coulda, needed to do, and just be in the fact of what is it, how are they doing? And I feel the same way. Like, I look at my kids, they're not perfect. They sometimes make decisions I don't agree with, but I do feel like we're laying the foundations that are supporting them in recognizing how these foods affect their body. And I believe that's kind of the best we can all do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're all doing the best we can. And sometimes we're made to feel bad for that. Like right now, there's this whole adding carbs back in thing going on in the carnivore community, and people are really hard on those of us that are trying to like stay strict carnivore with a pressure that you would never see. You know, if you look at food like it's an addiction, and I think for a lot of people it is, there is this pressure to eat the foods that we're abstaining from because we know it throws us off the rails. And then there's this pressure. You would never pressure an alcoholic like that, but we're being pressured. And I feel like you get that same pressure as a parent when your kids are younger, especially, and you're trying to avoid things like that. I used to take, like, I would find out when we were going to a birthday party, I would find out what color the cupcakes were going to be and what color the frosting was going to be. And I would make it myself and bring those for my kids to eat at birthday parties. Like, I mean, I've always been a crunchy mom, and that's what I used to do. And then as the kids got older, that became harder. And so you kind of let that go, but there's still constantly this pressure. Like my kids up until last Christmas had never had one of those, Little Debbie Christmas tree cakes or whatever they are. And the like people like kind of made fun of them for that they've never had one of those. And I was like, I'm actually really proud that they've never had one of those. And so I think as parents, you're right. There's always like this pressure and this standard that we're trying to stay with. And like, I remember making smoothies for my kids and hiding, spinach and, and all kinds of stuff in it. It's a lot easier to use your product and get organs into them than it ever was to hide spinach in a smoothie.
Yeah, I do love Pluck for that it's flavor first, right? It's like we make it taste good, and then the nutrients are kind of like, oh, bonus, you're also getting organ meats every time you use it. Yeah. But to me, it's got to taste good for it. Well, I've actually found for health food products, it's got to hit two characteristics. It's got to be easy to use, and then it's also got to be delicious. But I believe if you hit those two, and it can't be one or the other, it has to be both, then it's easier to make it a lifestyle choice. Because anything could be going on in your life, any emotional thing, any outward, planetary thing like COVID 5.0 or whatever. But it would be okay because it's easy and delicious. And I think what we saw even during that time in 2020, we saw a lot of health paradigms fall off because they weren't easy and they weren't necessarily delicious.
Yeah. So walk me through what this looked like for you with this idea that we need more organ meats and what's the easiest way to get them instead of taking them as a capsule. Like, what did that look like for you? Were you grinding beef liver in your kitchen and dehydrating it and turning it into a powder? Like, how did that look for you?
Yeah, so my youngest daughter, well, actually both daughters got sick. They got Shiga toxin, and my youngest was about a year old and my oldest was about 5. And my oldest got through it pretty quickly. Maybe 3 days. And with Shiga toxin, you can't hold anything down. So even water is just coming right back out. But you also cannot take an antibiotic. That could actually make it worse and or kill you. So it's one of those things that you have to let it pass through. And if it gets really bad, you go to the hospital and they hook you up to an IV, but you still have to let it pass through. And as I mentioned, my first daughter got through it pretty quick. My youngest, though, it just would not go away. And I thought it was going away, and I had to go out of town for a business trip. And I came back and she was skin and bones. And it was so frightening as a parent. I mean, she looked like the commercials I grew up, Sally Struthers used to, be supporting Ethiopian causes. And you'd see these pictures of these emaciated kids. Mm-hmm. And that's what she looked like, skin and bones. And I just remember seeing that, feeling desperate. Luckily, it did eventually pass, but she got addicted to toast because, when you're nothing's working, then the first food that does, you're now like, that's your safe food, right? So she got addicted to gluten-free toast. And I just was watching her eat it, just going like, this is not healthy. Like, I wish there was something I could sprinkle on this toast to make it healthier. So that was kind of the first kind of linchpin of me wanting to figure that piece out. Like, what could I easily do to add to any food? Because here's the thing. We forget, food is extremely emotional for people. And changing someone's diet is probably one of the hardest things people go through. I mean, to the point where in my 20 plus years of working with people and their health as a chef, I've really only seen people change their diets for 2 reasons. Either someone they love gets sick or they themselves get sick. That's kind of it. Most people will yo-yo through their lifetime and never really make change. So clearly there's an emotional tied to what we eat. There's comfort, all that kind of stuff. So I really saw there being an advantage of where I'm not trying to change what you're eating at this point. I'm just trying to make what you're eating more nutritious. And so I thought there was a lot of power and pluck around that. And so that was where I started experimenting. I was like, okay, as I mentioned, I did research on what is the most nutrient dense food. All my research pointed to beef organs specifically. Liver was the one that was the most accessible because there was already liver powders out there, and most of them were in capsules, but I could find some that were actually not capsules. It was just in, bins. And so I first started there. I first kind of tested the idea because ultimately what I was doing was I was thinking through, well, what is in a pate? You usually take onions, you take sometimes garlic, you're taking herbs, right? And I already knew that organ meat was freeze dried and powdered, so we already had it in a shelf stable form. I just needed to make it taste good.
Yeah.
And so that's when I was like, well, I'm making a dry pate. I'm adding granulated onion, garlic, different spices, lots of herbs. And then I experimented with the liver powder and it worked. And this was what was kind of cool. So I was able to have dinner parties and I would just put it on the food and not tell anyone because they were all meat eaters. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
And the feedback was like, what did you do? This food was so good. Like, what did you do to it? Because they already knew I was a chef, but they thought it was even more elevated than previous dinner parties. And so then I revealed, oh, there's organ meats in it, and this is what I'm working on. Everyone freaked out, and they were like, organ meat, and it was kind of at first this like gross kind of, oh my God, really? But I loved it. Like, what did you do? And so that was the start of it all, and then it became about, well, how many organs can I get in? And so Pluck has liver, heart, kidney, spleen, and pancreas, 5 organs. We're eventually going to be adding lung as well, so it will eventually be to 6. And then our goal is just to keep trying to get as much of that animal into everyone. And so we have other blends. We have a brain blend coming soon. We have a fertility blend coming soon. We have a virility blend. So it's all about how much of these real food, nutrient-dense foods we can get into people.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And the people at your dinner party didn't realize that what was happening partially was they were getting this high from those organs. Like when I eat, and I used to despise liver. Like my husband would eat it every now and then, and I couldn't even look at it. And every now and then he would say, do you want to try it? And he would give me a bite. It was like a texture thing. Like I couldn't get past the chalkiness, or it didn't even matter what it was, but it was that I knew what it was. And then it also had like that weird chalky texture. And now sometimes my mouth starts to water when I start making liver for us. And I buy the ones that are already cut into slices. I thaw them and I fry them in some butter, put a little bit of your seasoning on it, for the extra organs in it. And it's like one of the best things ever with some butter. I really like, my body wants that. And I know that now that my body wants it. And so like the very first time I ate a whole piece of liver, I was shocked. I was like, I cannot believe I just ate that. But then my body starts to crave it. Like once you start to give your body all of those extra nutrients, it knows what it needs and it will help you. It will steer you. Like that's one of the things about a carnivore diet or a meat-based diet is your body steers you towards what you need.
So true. I'm always telling people, like, we can all get in our heads about what we think we should be eating, but there's one person in this relationship with us that will never lie, that's always by our side, that's always directing the ship, and that's your body. You go ahead, try whatever diet you think you want to do, but then your job is to listen to your body, and your body's response is everything.
Yeah.
And I would watch people that were going that vegetarian route back in the day, and I would see them feeling bloated and gaining weight, and I'd be like, well, I don't think this is working, and it's not me trying to tell you this. I'm like, your body is telling you this. And they were like, no, I have to eat this way, it's better for the planet. And I'm like, but your body is screaming. Like, what are you talking about? Like, we have to start really being just listening more, and really looking at what's in front of us, not kind of getting on our soapboxes. I think that's a dangerous place to be because we're assuming we understand the supply chain. We're assuming that everything we buy is transparent and exactly what they say it is, and it's just not the case. We coexist in a broken system, and most of the time, people think things are so pure, and they really aren't. I mean, I learned when I was traveling through Ohio that they spray crops with glyphosate, or they spray organic crops with glyphosate to dry them. So here you are eating your beans and legumes thinking like, oh, they're organic, it's so clean. It's like, not necessarily. They might have been sprayed with glyphosate because they were grown organically And the spraying and drying them out isn't considered part of that organic label. So they can get
I did
away.
not know that.
I know, I didn't either. And I'm not saying every organic legume and bean or grain is sprayed with glyphosate. I'm just saying it is a practice. They spray crops with glyphosate to dry them, and yet they can still be labeled organic.
Crazy.
It's totally crazy. Like, I mean, I more and more just think that it's not about getting granular about this stuff and getting really to the heart of it. I think it's more about like, okay, do the best you can and then try to focus on your state as you eat this food and as you cook this food and as you buy this food. Like, focus on you de-stressing, on you not being so dialed into all the minutia, because I just don't think we can control it. I mean, even there's companies out there that, I mean, I remember like LMNT, who everyone was so excited about, like it came out that their flavoring had a cornstarch carrier, you know what I mean? And it's like they didn't know it initially because their provider didn't tell them and they had inquired. You know, that happens all the time where your source is not, you think that they're being transparent, but then you discover that they weren't. So if that's happening to a company like that, how many other companies is that happening to?
Yeah, I think it's really important to be as much hands-on and visible in the company as possible. And you do too, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I know to ask the question. So I know that these flavors have carriers. So I don't use flavors, first of all. But the kind of the beauty of our product, like one of the things we hope to do in 2026 is we hope to move people towards getting more unflavored products. So like, let's just say if you're doing a protein powder, we want you to buy unflavored because the flavor additives are really messing with us. And most of them are not pure. I would say 99% of them are not really pure. They all have carriers to a degree. They have things in them that are not natural to our diets. And so what I want to do is provide the real flavors, the real food flavors to people. You know, like there is no additive for cinnamon. Cinnamon is a natural product. You know, I can use cacao for chocolate. I can use actual dried vanilla bean paste. So we're not using any flavorings. And I don't have to worry about moisture because I don't have all the other products that those protein powders would have in them.
What do you think about grass-fed versus conventional meat? Do you have a preference there? Do you think it's a really big deal?
It's such a great question. And I talk about it often. And I recently talked about it at that conference. I actually think that it doesn't matter. Now, I want to qualify that. I think it does matter if you can afford it. But I think if you're worried about your money, I think it's far more important to get these organs into your diet than to worry about is this grass-fed or not. And you know, you can look at international markets. So like the Asian market, for example, you go to those markets, that's where you're going to find a lot of nose to tail product, you know, meat products. But pretty much all of them are not grass-fed. But then you go to like someplace like China or Japan or Korea, they look pretty darn healthy when they're eating their actual traditional diet and not being influenced by the US. They look pretty darn happy. I'm sorry. Well, maybe happy, but I mean healthy. But point being that we, on the other hand, you know, we are not only nutrient deficient, I think it's around 95% of the Americans are nutrient deficient, but more importantly is we are not calorie deficient. So here we are, an overweight, obese nation. So it's not an issue of we're not getting enough food. It's about that we're getting the wrong foods. And I believe that we would not eat as many of the wrong foods if we were eating more animal products and getting that protein. So if your restriction is like, hey, I can't afford 100% grass fed, then buy it conventional, because the reality is every cow starts off grass fed. Every one. The only difference is when they get old enough and then they move either to another field and they keep being grass fed, or they move to a confined CAFO. But I know what Rob Wolf, I think Diane, they did a book called Sacred Cow, and they even talked about this. They said the difference between the nutrition in grass fed and grain fed is not as great as everyone thinks it is. And to me, that just says, well, let's just get it into your diet. Don't worry about, once again, the minutia if you can't afford the grass fed. But if you can afford the grass fed, then absolutely always go towards the feed and the humanity that allows these animals to be their proper animals. Because animals, cows are herbivores. They should be feeding off the grasslands. So if you can afford that, absolutely 100% do that. But similar to fish, because there was that time when the mercury scare around fish, people were stopping to eat fish. I believe fish is important. I really do. And I think that the fear of something, one ingredient, in that case, mercury, shouldn't offset you still getting some fish. Yeah, maybe you're not eating it every day,
Right.
but you should still get it in your diet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to add to that Anthony Chafee says the difference between grass-fed and conventional meat is like being a gold medalist or a silver medalist in the Olympics. You're still up on the podium. Like,
Totally.
yeah, it's not a big deal. And so we usually eat conventional. I like the conventional better, but when possible, I get it from a local farm who, I know they're treating the animals right. And I mean, honestly, a majority of the time it's coming from the grocery store. It's just because we're busy. It's hard, you do got to just, you've run out of meat. You got to run to the store and grab something. And I think that's okay. I do want to support as many local farmers as I can. I would like for that to be the root of where we get, most of our foods. But you got to just do what you got to do to make sure you're eating meat. You make sure you're eating the most nutrient-dense food there is.
Totally. And the reality is that, you have to cook 100% grass-fed meat differently. You cannot overcook it. It will get too hard because it's leaner. And then the other piece is that sometimes 100% grass-fed beef tastes kind of fishy.
That,
So if you go to the wrong farm or it doesn't meet your taste buds, then you're going to think all 100% grass-fed,
Mhm.
beef is like that. But it's all about, to your point, what works for your household? What's going to enable you just to make it a priority of getting that meat into your diet, and then worry about sourcing from there. And like you said, if you have access to a local farm and you like the taste of it, and you can accommodate that you can't cook it the same as you would grain fed, then great. But
Yeah.
in no way should that limit you. Like, to your point, to be on the podium is to eat animal products.
Right.
And so that should be the priority. The sourcing to me is second.
Yeah, I agree with that 100% because my life is vastly different when I'm eating primarily meat, and I'm honest about this all the time. I have fallen off the wagon more times this year than I had the previous 3 years combined, and I don't feel as good. And honestly, my whole family is out of whack if I'm out of whack. If I'm not eating right, my whole family isn't eating right. It just throws everything off kilter, and it affects my behavior as a human being. If I'm not eating enough meat, enough protein, enough fat, if I'm eating too many carbs or too many processed foods, it's like a free for all at my house, and nobody does well and nobody realizes what's happening until, like, at some point I will say, I'm off the rails. And they're like, oh, now we get it. It's like it affects my entire family when I'm not eating mostly meat, eggs, cheese, lots of butter.
And that's the truth, right? Once again, your body is telling you what works, and we just have to kind of be honest with it. I agree. I'm at that age in my life where it's like, I don't want to feel bad. Like, I make choices for my health now, and I don't make it for my ego or for my cravings. I just don't, because it's like, I already know what a cookie tastes like. You know what I mean? I already know what these things taste like. And so it's really kind of digging into, what is my why? Like, what am I doing here? What value am I trying to provide? And what relationships am I building and harnessing in my life? And so to me, those take precedent. And I agree. If I don't get good sleep, if I don't eat well, I'm not a good person.
Yeah, I need to write down what you just said about I already know what a cookie tastes like because that's really good. And for me, a couple of weeks ago, my husband and I were out of town and I was just kind of eat whenever I wanted, just for fun. And like I woke up one morning and I was like, now I remember what it feels like now. Like I feel like a normal 52-year-old today. My knee hurts, my hip hurts. I was actually limping a little bit. I know why people take Tylenol on a regular basis. Like I didn't take anything because I don't ever take anything. Even when I'm really, really sick, I don't ever take anything. I just let things run their course because I feel like it's okay to have a headache. It's okay to have a fever. It's okay to have body aches and pains. It's just normal, like when you're sick, I mean. But in our normal lives, we should not have those aches and pains. And few days, a week back on really strict carnivore, anti-inflammatory foods, my knee stops hurting, my hip stops hurting, my brain goes back to what I consider normal. Like I don't have the brain fog anymore. I'm not making poor decisions anymore. I can gather my thoughts easier. And most people out there don't know that food can affect us like that it can actually like change who you are.
Totally. And you mentioned this earlier, and I want to just kind of open it up for people, is you mentioned flavor, and texture. Well, I guess I talked about flavor, but you mentioned texture. And a lot of times I think people think that we focus on flavor. They think that we are more about flavor, but I actually think we're more about texture. And if you look at even like a bag of chips, like when we first eat that bag, the first few chips, we only taste the first three or four. Everything else thereafter is all about the crunch. You're chasing the texture. And if you think about it, even if you're eating 100% carnivore, when I have done that, what gets to me is that I'm missing flavor and I'm missing some different textures, because I'm the type of personality where I like variety. I like that, but I don't necessarily always crave, some of the foods that are traditionally on the plate. So what I find helps is, for me, when I add flavor to the meat, that helps me. But then the other piece is I change up the different textures so that they're not always the same. So maybe you're braising the meat and you're stewing it or something like that so that it's softer. Maybe you're cutting it really thin and then drying it and making it like a chip. But I think like really messing with textures will keep people more invested and engaged with it, because I mean, I know there's the Sean Bakers who eat it just straight, but even he shares, like, sometimes he'll go off of it because of his kid's birthday or something like that. And I think this idea that we're all following this dogmatic diet it's not very human. I think when you talk to anthropologists or archaeologists, they're now even admitting like humans have always been opportunistic. So wherever we are, whatever food is available, we eat it. It's not like we follow one diet ever. And so I think that, like for me, what I find when I'm doing 100% carnivore is I still crave some vegetables, but I get them in the form of cultured vegetables. So what I'm focusing on is not necessarily on the what, I'm focusing on the how. And what I mean by that is that, when Dr. Bill Schindler talks about this. So originally we were foragers, and we spent a long time, trying to find enough nutrients. Then we became scavengers. So we did get some meat, but we didn't get the three things that eventually blew up our brain and then made our digestive tract smaller, which was, we got blood, we got organs, and we got fat. And when we got those three, we also got fire around that time. And that's essentially what this Homo sapien body we're in, that's how it was developed. So we have a big brain, but now we cannot digest the things that we used to before we were Homo sapien. But because of this big brain, is we can pre-digest these foods outside. So we can take foods that maybe aren't as bioavailable. We can take foods that are maybe not as digestible, and we can ferment them. We can culture them. We can do things to them that make them bioavailable, that make them nutritious. And I find when I add like cultured veg or ferments to my diet, I feel so good. My poops are good. Everything just kind of dials in. So that's just me listening to my body.
Right. Yeah. Listening to our body is such a big indicator of where we are in our health. And most people don't know that. And you and I were talking about this before we hit record, that I believe that if everybody went on some sort of a ketogenic diet, now a clean ketogenic diet, not with the processed foods and things like that, but meats, whole vegetables, if everybody went on a whole foods diet, heavy on the fat and the meat, I believe the pharmaceutical companies would go out of business.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I agree. As I mentioned, this is a broken system. We're essentially being tricked. We are the only species in the world that looks to someone else to tell us what to eat. Like, take that in, everyone. Yeah. Like, there's 9 million plus species, and yet we're the only ones that like, what should I be eating? What diet should I follow? And so that clearly tells you that we did know, that we're not so unique that we're the only ones, right? Our higher brain power doesn't mean that we're dependent on someone else. It just means that we've complicated things. And the marketing machine is doing just that, when you add in flavor. So essentially, ancestrally, flavor equaled nutrition. Okay, that's what our bodies, the communication path. If you had flavor, that indicated this was going to nourish me. And remember, back in the day, it was really two points of communication. Is this food going to nourish me, or is it going to kill me? But it was serious, right? Because if you ate the wrong food, you really could die.
Yeah.
So now we have a miscommunication because we have foods that have strawberry flavor, which our body thinks this is nutrition, but the nutrition never comes because it's just flavoring. And that is absolute confusion. And then that's what causes you to eat more and to overeat and to never feel satiated. To me, the three kind of principles of the food pyramid, if I were to create my own that I follow, are the following. One is you want the food you're eating to have flavor found in nature, not natural flavors, but flavors found in nature. Two, you want the food to be nutrient dense. Three, and this is the part that most people don't talk about, is you then now want to mindfully eat it. And it's a lot of what we've been talking about, which is as I eat it, I'm eating it slow enough where there's a communication going on about how much do I need, how much do I want. And if you mindfully eat these things, you will find your body will regulate. It will tell you exactly when to stop and what it needs. And it's so funny too how it shows up. Like, I don't know, have you ever done this where you're in the grocery store and you're going to grab a box of cookies or something and it fumbles out of your hand? Like you can't, and then you go to try to pick up and it falls out again. Well, that's a form of muscle testing, right? It's like your body is telling you, don't eat this. Mm-hmm. But once again, we're not listening. We're not seeing it like that. Well, this happens in the same way when you're trying to lift something that's too heavy. What happens to your grip? It gives out. So the body is constantly communicating to us. We just have to listen and start actually respecting the communication signals.
Yeah, and people think that eating healthy is complicated, but what's really complicated is going to the store and buying those ultra-processed foods like that. That's complicated. The process that it took for that to get there is super complicated. The easiest way is to just grab some fruits and vegetables. Just grab whatever you like and grab a bunch of meat and go home and cook that meat in butter or tallow, eat it, and cook some vegetables to go with it. Like, I'm a carnivore, so I don't usually talk about vegetables, but I feel like that's the way for most people. I think everybody should be carnivore for a little while, 30, 60, 90 days. And then you can add things back in, those natural whole foods, and see how you do with them. And I think that's how you find out how you're supposed to eat. But after that 90 days, you're going to feel so good. You're not going to want to add the garbage back in unless you're addicted like I am. And then you fall off sometimes, but you always remember that you feel your best on carnivore and you come right back to it because that is how we feel amazing.
Yeah, I agree. I think actually, I don't normally say this to people, but I do believe if you're someone who's eating ultra processed foods right now and you want to make a change, that it's actually easier to just go cold turkey and to go 100% carnivore and just do it straight. Because what's nice about it is that you don't have as many choices, and that is actually a good thing when you first are doing change, is you don't want to be kind of frozen with like, oh, what do I do? Should I eat this or that? With carnivore, it's like, I'm eating meat today. That's it. It's not too complicated. And so I encourage people, make the break and do something that's extremely simple and not complicated. And then hopefully in like you said, that 90 days, you're not as pulled by your addictions, but then you can start introducing things. But ultimately, when you do something like 100% carnivore, you're really doing what we call an elimination diet. You're doing an elimination diet. And that's why, in the past, you'd see these documentaries and people say, oh, I went vegan and look at what happened. It's like, that's all it was. It was just an elimination diet. That's really it. And so it's like, it's not about one diet's better than the other. It's about pull out all the stuff that's kind of weighing you down and just keep it simple and then slowly introduce things and listen to your body. Like, what does your body want and not want?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this conversation was really great, James. Thank you so much for joining us. How can people find you?
You can find us on our website, eatpluck.com. You can find us on socials at eatpluck, and I'm at Chef James Berry.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was a great conversation.
Thank you.
And thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you next time on the Carnivore Revolution.